Every single time you speak to a youngster or an employee in the call center, the conversation will not finish until you've had something related to finances or financial challenges.
Even though we sit on those levels now, we have an understanding because we were there once. And we know the support we've needed during those times. And so we try to display the same to our employees in terms of what we offer.
Welcome to another episode of Earnings Unleashed, a podcast dedicated to unlocking your pay potential. In studio with me today, I've got two wonderful guests that I am dying to sink my teeth into a very, very meaningful conversation. For the benefit of our audience, good sir, we'll start with you, Phil. Why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us who you are and where you work and what do you do?
Sure. I am Phillip Tshikotshi. I'm the Vice President of Human Resources for a company called StarTech. We run call centers.
Excellent.
We do that for a living.
Oh, love it already. Yeah. And next to Phil, we've got our good friend Candice. Candice, why don't you introduce yourself?
Sure. So I'm Candice Naidoo. I'm the director at StarTech. And I head up the diversity portfolio for them. I've been with the organization for 20 years, being part of the growth journey. And so, yeah.
You joined at the age of 14?
Amazing. So today's conversation is around, I think, transformation and I think diversity, equity, and inclusion. Particularly the inclusion piece, because I think it's a really, really important piece. We've just come off the month of July, where it was dedicated to National Savings Month in South Africa. A lot of messaging and language around encouraging employees to save more money, to ensure that they've got sufficient retirement plans. And to really drive that sort of inclusive language. Yeah. Maybe, Phil, I want to start with you. And I think working in the call center space, and you've really been progressive in your stance of human capital and creating an employee experience that is outside of the norm. Why is this such an imperative for you?
Well, thank you once again for having me here. I think one of the things that we tend to ignore as employers is the financial wellness of our employees. We tend to focus on a lot of other things except financial wellness. And the reason why, we've started paying attention to that is because we work with youngsters in the call centers. And we have seen, certain patterns and behaviors related to absenteeism, high attrition, and we were trying to kind of see and identify why that was happening a lot. And when we figured it out, we realized that we needed to do what we're doing now, which actually includes partnering with you guys. Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah. In fact, Phil, can I put you on the spot a little? Yeah. I think you're one of the first leaders in the BPO space to strongly advocate for financial inclusion. Yeah. And I commend your efforts and I think the stance that you've taken in advocating for people and giving a voice to those who didn't feel that they had any other options in the financial ecosystem, because I think these conversations are so important. Yeah. And perhaps the reason why as leaders we shoulder so much responsibility is to that end, right? Is our ability to use our voice and to advocate for others. Why has this been your personal mission?
And you know what, Andy? It was the easiest decision to make after having met with you. Because we are connected to the pulse of our employees. Yeah. Every single day on the floor. We don't lead from the top. Yeah. We are on ground with our employees and we understand their struggles. And every single time you speak to a youngster or an employee in the call center, the conversation will not finish until you've had something related to finances or financial challenges. And as an employer, we wanted to sort of look at how do we address that challenge? How do we bring in financial freedom for our employees and also just ensure that they're liberated, because that is definitely one of the biggest challenges that we find today in our country. And that's why it was so easy to to take that leap. I don't want to even call it the leap of faith, because it was just the right thing to do for our employees. Yeah.
That is incredible. Candice, I want to come to you. I think having been with the company for as long as you have, you've seen the evolution of the company. You've seen the direction of the employee experience. Why is transformation such an important business imperative?
So I think for me, transformation is very personal. And whenever we make decisions in the organization, and even when it comes to employee wellness, we always reflect from a self point of view. We grew in the organization. I started as a 2-week temp. We also didn't come from, we've come from humble beginnings. Yeah. And so that salary was important to us. Getting to work was important to us, and we valued those jobs. And so even though we weren't born into directorship, for example. And so even though we sit on those levels now, we have an understanding because we were there once. And we know the support we've needed during those times. And so we try to display the same to our employees in terms of what we offer. Recently, and I think also when it comes to transformation, and there's a lot of focus on mental well-being, but Phillip would know, I've got diagnosed with severe depression and anxiety during the COVID period. And for me, it became a personal, challenge almost. And so it became personal for me to help others that are going through that as well, to overcome, because it shouldn't limit us in terms of our potential, if that makes sense.
Yeah, 100%. And in fact, I commend you and thank you so much for trusting our platform and being vulnerable. I don't think we see enough leaders who I think own their challenges, because there's a part of leadership where, martyrdom is the thing, right? Like you have to be strong, and so I just have so much respect, I think, for leaders who I think own their human experience. So thank you for that. I want to stay with this trail of thought, Candice, for a minute, because I think this is really important, and I don't want to miss the essence of this. Diversity, inclusion, and belonging have been big themes the last couple of years. Why is it important for other executives to perhaps follow suit in the direction and the journey that StarTech has taken in terms of creating a space of belonging for their employees? Like, why is this an important imperative?
Okay. So for me, what I believe is, as individuals, we are a whole. So there's different aspects to us. There's the mental aspect, there's the career aspect, there's the family aspect. And so financial aspect is also one of those aspects that make an individual. And so I think, if you look at the Maslow hierarchy of needs and the requirements that sit there, financially, in order to feed yourself, which is the basic need, in order to provide shelter for yourself, you need the financial backing to do those things. And so in order for you to be a more confident person, you have to have those things. And maybe from a cultural point of view, and I don't know if I'm going a little bit off topic here, but for a lot of us growing up, brands made us feel more comfortable in our skin. So if we weren't using a Levi's or a Soviet, we didn't feel as comfortable and as confident as kids who were using hand-me-downs. And so when you're able to take care of yourself financially, and not necessarily from a brand point of view, you come out more confident in your personality. You come out more confident as a worker, as an employee. And when you're more confident, you tend to perform better. You tend to be more, you're fulfilling your potential in that sense. And so for me, that's where I see the financial point of it coming in, and the financial well-being is because it impacts the rest of who you are.
Yeah, I love that. In fact, Phil, I want to come to you because there's a stat that makes reference to, employees who are financially unwell tend to be less productive, right? Because they're wrestling with decisions that they need to make, and those decisions impact their quality of life. And perhaps my question, Phil, is how can we as leaders better foster environments that I think extend themselves to more financial wellness?
Well, you're quite right, and that study is quite accurate. And I'm actually doing something very similar as part of my study, my PhD studies, which talks to the link between high productivity and employee engagement. You can speak about employee engagement, but you cannot speak about it without including financial awareness to it, or financial well-being into it. But what organizations can do, at least what we are doing, to foster that is you are not about to implement anything for the employees without understanding what the needs are. So it starts with really just checking first with the pulse of the employees. And I'll make a lot of reference to the pulse of the employees, because you're not about to make decisions for employees without knowing what they really want.
Certainly.
And often, we see this through the low productivity, low outputs, and we wonder what's going on. And I have seen some leaders make mistakes of going into to do performance management on agents because they're seeing that this person is not performing, not having actually gone in to try and find out why that particular person is actually not performing, because actually you find that it's not actually linked to the actual performance in terms of the KPIs that are put in place, but it's linked to their own burdens that they are carrying on a daily basis. And most of those are related to finances, especially, post-COVID. We've seen mental breakdowns happen to most of our employees even, and that's why we have wellness support, counseling being in place, and of course we've also partnered with yourselves in providing that financial wellness, education, and the opportunity for the employees to actually to start saving for the rainy day. So I think that's what leaders should be doing, to first delve deep to try and understand. Let's have the conversations with our people. And I think the question and the challenge that I can always put to the other leaders is, how often do we actually engage with our people?
Yeah.
How often do we walk around and just go to the floor? Especially, I'm going to reference the call centers. I want to just say, how are you doing? But the mistakes we make is that we sit in the boardroom and we think we know it all.
Unfortunately.
So, and which is really, really unfortunate. So it starts on ground. It starts on ground, for sure. Yeah.
Phil, you've given me so much, and I'm really trying to sink my teeth into all of this wisdom.
Yeah.
What do we say to employers who are maybe a bit paternalistic, who have a bit of a pushback?
Yeah.
I think particularly to the concept of earned wage access as a product and as something that ought to be available to employees.
So let me answer this question differently.
Okay.
We recently did a media employee net promoter survey.
Okay.
Where we are just checking again on the pulse of the employees to see how well they're doing halfway through the year. We do this one quarterly. And the one that we just did recently, and the results came out about 2 weeks ago, if I'm not mistaken. There was one question that said, what are you, so 2 questions, we focused on 2 questions, even though the whole survey had about 9. The 2 key questions were, what are you most happy about in the workplace? And the other one was, what are you least happy about in the workplace?
Yeah.
Surprisingly, one of the things that came out as a benefit, as one of the things that the employees are happy about, is Floatpays.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It came out purely because...
Amazing.
So, and that surprised me, because initially when we did this, we had just seen Floatpays as a service provider, but we had not seen it as an employee benefit.
Right.
Now...
That's such a switch. I think, like with the language and everything.
Absolutely.
Hey?
So, and that's why I'm choosing to respond to it differently.
Yes,
because,
I appreciate
or in this
that.
way, because now our employees are seeing this. This is actually a benefit for us. It's a benefit because it's giving me financial freedom. I can do this thing on my own. I just sit on my phone and I do this. Prior to this, as an organization, we used to have a policy still there, but we don't activate it much. Salary advances.
Yeah.
Employees would send us. We would process hundreds of salary advances a month, and employees would come through, and it's sometimes you also don't want to just be showing your employer that every
Sure.
other time I'm facing this situation.
Yeah.
But then you have to, because you have to come and speak to me for an approval.
Sure.
Now, since the introduction of this type of product or this type of service, no one speaks to Phil anymore.
Yeah.
Everyone just goes independently. I need to liberate myself. I need to do something. I'm stuck here. I need to do this, and they just go and do that without us even knowing.
Yeah.
Which is really, really important. Yeah.
That is so critical, and I think we underestimate the value of protecting people's dignity.
Yes.
And that's what it is, right? I think
Absolutely.
with advances, having
Yeah.
to be vulnerable,
Yeah.
having to share,
Yeah.
really, really private information that ideally I would not like my employer to know.
Yeah.
And yet I'm in the eye of the storm.
Absolutely.
Right? And I need to solve it.
Absolutely. And I think one of the reasons why they do see it as a benefit is because they are now able to, it brings with it financial education. They are now able to manage their finances better.
Beautiful.
When they used to come to me and say, I need a salary advance, okay, approved.
Sure, sure.
But then it ends there. I
Yeah.
don't get to, process and what happens after that advance. Is it being, so there is no science behind it. It's just me
Yeah.
approving and I leave them alone. But when they're doing it through a service such as Floatpays, there's also a tracking that's in place where we are able to see that the utilization is like this, and there's education that follows, and and I think there are triggers actually that are able to be picked up to say, Houston, maybe we have a problem with this particular individual.
Correct.
Because maybe they are utilizing this facility way too often than they should, and so therefore we need to give them help. As an employer, I wouldn't have been able to pick that up and do that, even if I could. Given the volumes of the employees that we manage, I could never have the bandwidth to
Certainly.
do something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Gosh, Candice, Phil is alluding to, I guess, the importance of being responsible, conscious employers, right? And maybe our moral obligation in looking after our employees has become so paramount these last couple of years. And perhaps from the lens of transformation and in your space, I want to talk about the sense of belonging, right? So how can we foster more environments that create a safe space for employees, I think, to either speak up or either even request for products and services like a Floatpays without feeling that they are vulnerable and they're exposed. I mean, can you talk us through just the importance of belonging?
Sure. So, not to sound over spiritual when I say this,
Yeah.
but I always take it back to biblical principles. And, one of the things the Bible speaks about is when you praise, you build up.
Yes,
And when there's curses, it breaks down.
that's right.
And so when we speak about belonging and inclusion, we're speaking about building an environment that's respectful, that's including your, your emotions. It's including your thought process. And when we are building that up from a praise, performance, reward, recognition point of view, we're actually making people more comfortable with their own thoughts and their own emotions. And so, so from that angle, I think it's extremely important, in building up those environments that speak to, let's not, so I'll speak about myself, for example.
Yeah.
And I was a victim of corporate bullying.
Yeah.
And for many years, and I don't even know if I was great back then, now in hindsight when I look at it.
Yeah.
But, for many years, I've had leaders telling me how great I was and how brilliant I was. And so for the last 20 years, or well, back then it would have been like 16 years, I was growing really well in the organization. And then 16 years in, and it was during the COVID period, we had somebody that came in and probably didn't understand our culture as much. And I then experienced the corporate bullying.
Yeah.
And suddenly I started questioning my own capabilities. And then I'd wake up and I'd be like, I don't want to go to work today because I'm not making a difference.
Sure.
And why would I wake up and go to work? And because if I make an error, somebody's waiting for me to make that error. And then I'm going to lose my job. And it's not just my job, it's my house and my reputation and, all of these things that I've built for myself. And so suddenly it's, you start to see that impact you have on people as a leader. And I never want to do that to my people. So I get up in the morning and I go, and sometimes I am angry at people because things haven't been delivered and things haven't been, done a certain way that I've asked it to be done. But I have to look at myself and go, remember what was done to you. And you don't want to do that to the next person.
That's right.
So let's help them reach their goal by giving them the support that they need. Think about, like I say, I always use myself as the person. Like, what sort of support would I have needed in that time to get to where I need to be? And so I take it from that approach. And so, I remember reading this book called The 1 Minute Manager. And one of the things was, let's catch people doing something right.
Right.
Instead of trying to catch them doing something wrong.
That's right.
And so when you start fostering those sort of emotions in somebody, it enhances that belonging feeling. It enhances that, my opinion matters. I'm valued. And I think that's where it stems from.
Yeah, I have such an appreciation for that because I think there's a couple of things you've said there. I think one is the symmetry between risk and reward. And I think employers understanding that dynamic tension between those two things. I loved how you've just anecdotally, and you've said it so gracefully, just the importance of feeling like you matter, feeling like your voice matters, and that there's a space safe enough for you to voice your concerns or to voice your fears, but also equally that there's a space that celebrates you. And we don't talk about this stuff, I think, enough, right? I think the need for people to feel like they're celebrated and that they matter. So thank you so much for sharing that. Phil, I want to come to you. You and I speak at a lot of, HR conferences, and I think we advocate and we are evangelists of the employee experience messaging and why this is important. In the context of, again, financial wellness, and I'm going to sound like a broken record because I think these are conversations that are important for us to have and for us to break through that ceiling. What more can we share with our colleagues around the importance of this and why thinking outside of the norms is so important? So outside of the traditional compensation models, which in some environments are necessary, right? But I think, where there's an opportunity to introduce something that is complementary to that, like what is the messaging and maybe the evangelism we can spread to our colleagues for them to start reshaping their thinking around compensation models?
Yeah, I think there's a saying that says the proof of the pudding is in
proof is in the pudding.
In this case, we have done this. And we have seen that it works. As an employer that employs close to 3,000 people in South Africa.
Right.
We are giving this testimony to say this works. So to our peers in the industry, you can just use us as a proof of concept, or but certainly the one other message that I can really give out to our peers in the industry is to say, look, how often are we, and I know I've touched on this earlier on, how often are we touching on you call them the Maslow
hierarchy
of needs.
That's right.
How often? Because I think that's very, very important.
Yeah.
How often are we tapping into those? And as we do that, we will find that it is par for the course. No industry leader needs to be persuaded or to be convinced to look at this type of models for their employees. Definitely, there's no persuasion.
Yeah.
It starts with just the conversations with your employees and checking what their needs are, and it will be no surprise that the financial wellness or the financial need or the financial education will be one of the key things that will come out of those conversations with the staff or the employees within their organizations.
Yeah. Amazing. And speaking of staff within your organization particularly, could you maybe share with us an anecdotal story where Floatpays has come to the rescue, and you've maybe heard this through the floor of employees who thought, I was in a pickle. And Floatpays came to my rescue.
Actually, there's quite a few stories, but the one that was so touching for me, and it's a recent one where one of the employees had death in the family, and there was a bit of delay in getting the funds from the funeral policy, etc. And then they came to us to say, look. What do we do? How can the company give us an advance? And I said, have you forgotten you've got Floatpay? And this person actually had not yet activated their Floatpay account, so they had not used it. So they went there and they were able to access the funds literally immediately.
Yeah.
And they were able to go and help with the immediate needs of the family while they were waiting for the funeral policies to pay. So I can only imagine that if Floatpay wasn't there at that particular point in time, this employee could have gone to what they call them, mashonisas, or attracting
Loan sharks.
The loan sharks.
That's
that is
right.
it, attracting very high interest rates that would have actually hindered them from actually financial freedom, because once you find yourself in that trap, it's very, very difficult to come out of it. So, and it's one of the things. It's one of the second story actually that came as a testimony from the guys that we are so happy that we don't have to use the loan sharks anymore.
Oh.
Yeah. And so it's really
that warms
great.
my heart so much.
Absolutely, because most of them were, in fact, using the loan sharks.
Yeah.
And again, the mere fact that Floatpay is coming out, a most recent survey as a positive contributor to the Net Promoter Score. It's a big thing for us.
Incredible.
It's incredible. And I mean, we presented these results at our most recent EXCO meeting, and they were very surprised to see that actually Floatpay could come out as a benefit. But it's all good things, and we're quite delighted and very, very happy with the product, especially the savings part of it. The guys are learning now, to save. And at least by the end of the year, they can give themselves a nice bonus by making a withdrawal and then continue to save again.
Yeah. I mean that is an incredible outcome. These are the kind of stories I think are so important to anchor the messaging and why this is important. Around thinking differently about what compensation means, the redefinition of benefits as it appears,
absolutely,
from your ecosystem. So I am utterly thrilled. I think at this revelation, and I certainly would want to share it. I think with our ecosystem and our clients with your permission.
Oh, you're welcome to.
Thank you. So perhaps help me land this conversation, and maybe we'll start with you, Candice. And again, I want to touch on the importance of inclusion with the lens of financial inclusion. You mentioned earlier the culture piece, which I think is so important because context is everything, right? And I think our way as Africans and our relationship with money has been evolving these last couple of years. Is it evolving at the pace that it should be? Our macroeconomic issues outpacing our thinking, and how can we as employers better support employees in that space?
So I think this goes back to, I think, fundamental upbringing, right? So at root level, if I can say that. So in schools, if you look at the curriculum and what we thought to excel in certain subjects like history and geography, which when we come to a work environment is not of use to us. We're not taught in a school environment to budget and how to save towards something you want and how to work. And I think as we evolve as people and in our societies today, we go, oh, I'll pay you for a chore as a kid. And then you use your chore to buy a packet of chips. And, you teach your child within those spaces. But there's so many or the majority of our society is ignorant to that fact. And they still live in that concept of, you have to do well at school and you have to do all of these things. But the important stuff of survival when you're an adult is not taught to you.
Sure.
And so suddenly you find these people that come into the workspace, and it grates me, this 33% pass rate.
Yeah.
And they think 33% is enough to give into your workspace. And then you come as an adult and you're failing in that workspace because you haven't been taught the fundamentals of how to perform in that space.
Sure.
Because you've been, how can I say, it's been instilled in you that 33% is enough. And so for me, again, it comes back to, and I think, the mindsets and changing the mindsets of people. And if I think about myself again, I use, when I got into the workplace, I remember my first interview and they were like, tell me about yourself. And I'm like, I have a mother and a father. And like literally, because you're so unexposed, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so suddenly, and then the more I got exposed and I got talking to people, and then I was like, oh, am I capable of that?
Right.
Can I, like buying a house, my own house? Like, is that a possibility? But you had to learn that through exposure to people, through conversations, through seeing other people who have come from where you've come and make it in life. And so I think what we lack is going into environments and teaching people that this is possible.
Yeah.
If, making it a reality, it's almost like, again, going back to biblical stuff. In church, they used to say, stand up and give your testimony.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just because people want to know your stories. It's about encouraging the next person who may be going through that.
Absolutely.
And they don't understand that they can actually come out of it if they just think of it in a different way.
Right.
And I remember there was this girl, and I don't know if you remember Veronica, who we hired from a home that we used to work with, New Jerusalem. And she was reaching the age of 18, and the home could no longer see to her. And so we tried to put her onto like a learnership program with us. And so she came into that environment. And I remember the one day I was like trying to encourage her because she was struggling a little bit. And, they were scared she wasn't going to pass accreditation. And so she used to come and sit with me in my office. And I used to be like, okay, so tell me what you're going through and what you're feeling and why you're feeling this way. And, so for her, she was in the home system at the age of 8. And she didn't know any better. And, like a security guard at the gate would say, I love you. And she believes it because she never got that her whole life. And so suddenly I realized I had to train somebody to be different. What we think is common sense because of our upbringing and our exposures are not common sense to everybody else.
Yeah.
Their realities are different. And so I think we need to come from a point of understanding where they're coming from. And so the one day I sat with her and I said, Veronica, I want to show you my house, because everybody's so, like, from a girly point of view, they're so fascinated with it. And I said, and I want to show you that I've started where you're starting today. I've been given the same opportunity you are given today. And I want to show you where I am I think it was 15 years down the line. And I said, if you work at it, and she looks at me with this wide eyes and goes, this will take me 1,000,000 years. And I said, but it doesn't take me 1,000,000 years.
Oh, bless.
You know, but to see her and the fact that she didn't believe in herself because nobody was instilling that in her. And I think a lot of it goes back to mental and psychological things that we need to start fixing in our societies and from grassroots levels. And so, you know, and it became this, like, we used to go into the homes and we'd give them school shoes, or we'll throw them Christmas parties, and then we gone for the rest of the year. And I got so involved, and I remember I used to go with another colleague into Alex, and we used to mentor the kids because it became the concept of give a man the fish and feed him for a day, teach a man to fish, and you feed him for a lifetime. And I think that's something we want to.
And I think this is why inclusion and belonging are so important as concepts, right? And I think for us who have been privileged, for us to repurpose our privilege, and I think to show and demonstrate what is possible. Phil, I want to close off with you and maybe help me land this message. What would be the call to action for leaders who are considering a platform and a product such as Floatpays, knowing what you know now, right? You've walked the journey. You've been in this ecosystem for probably much longer than the average HR director in this country. And for me, it's important that I call that out, because I really commend your advocacy work in this space. There aren't many HR leaders who have been confident in driving an alternative, agenda and a solution to help their employees. What can we say to leaders who are maybe watching this and they are on the fence for whatever reason, and how can we get them to understand the value of why this work is important?
Yeah, sure. So if the leaders are interested in high productivity, employee retention, and low absenteeism in the workplace, it is a no-brainer to consider this product. I can tell you that. Where I think there is a challenge is, and you find that most leaders are resistant to change because they are used to doing the same things. And there's that speaker who's often quoted, doing the same thing over and over again, expecting the same
different result.
Different result. So I can certainly say to my peers in the industry, if they're looking for a value add and different results, or someone may argue that I'm actually doing well. If you're looking for even better results, then this is definitely an option. And my advice, if you are uncertain, it's as simple as just doing a snap survey with your employees. You'll be surprised that they will actually agree that change needs to happen, because this is certainly what the employees want in the workplace. No doubt about it.
Incredible. I want to thank you both for your time and allowing us to lean into your wisdom. For anyone who is watching this episode, if you want to get in touch with our team, you can get in touch with us at support@floatpays.co.za. We're very happy to engage with you and certainly to share some of the insights and the nuggets that have been shared by our two guests today. So to you, Candice and Phil, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you
for having us.
Thank you for having us.